Hey, it's April, and today I'm going to be adding to my mushroom series with a cursed mushroom. I've been rereading the Southern Reach trilogy, it's one of my favourite book series, so I thought it'd be fun to make something mutated, really unsettling and unnatural looking, but mixed with a whimsical, cartoon zombie kind of vibe. And the cap is based on a fly agaric. They are hallucinogenic, so it seemed pretty fitting for a somewhat trippy character. After prepping the base doll, I sliced off the nose and the lips, marked out the new features, cut the eye holes, removed her ears, and filled the inside of the head with Apoxie Sculpt so I have a solid surface to work on. No squish. I'm covering the head with more Apoxie Sculpt, making sure it's nice and smooth, and pushing some blobs of Fimo into the eye sockets. I also push toothpicks into the sides of a head so I can make some Fimo ears. I prefer using polymer clay for parts I can remove and bake since it's a lot easier to shape and it doesn't sag like epoxy. I'm adding wires for the drippy bits. I then attach the ears back to the head with a strip of epoxy. I want our eyes to look extremely sunken in, so I'm building up the area around them so it's nice and chunky. Girl's not slept in centuries, or been able to blink for that matter. I'm carving the little cracked mouth for a touch of creepiness, but keeping it nice and smiley to show that she may be cursed, but she's still friendly. That's also part of the reason why I did the asymmetrical eyes. Derpy always looks cute and friendly. Now to make some holes. Like I said, I use cartoon zombies as inspiration, and also I think parts of her would tear and fall off as the new mutations grow out of her. Oh, and I cut the feet off too. Before adding the eyeballs, I'm building up some simple petal shapes. That way it'll look like the eyes are blooming out of her stomach rather than just stuck on top. Smush the eyeballs into an uncured lump of epoxy so I can add more wrinkles like I did on her face. I'm adding some more of the raggedy bits to the chest area, which I should have made differently as one side of the paint it got super annoying for scratching, but I managed to fix it with lots of sealant. Lots of little pustules in varying sizes. And more flaps and whatnot. And plenty on the back of the torso as well. Her left leg is going to match her right arm, just lots of holes and torn flesh. Making sure to keep moving that joint so that I don't accidentally lock it in place. However, her right leg is going to be wrapped in vines. These would definitely change and grow over time, but for this depiction of her, I'm going to cover from the thigh down to the ankle, like a disturbing leg warmer. I then did the exact same process on her lower legs, but she's still missing some feet. So I covered some wound armature wire in foil and Fimo, and then started building up the shapes. First some flat bits on the bottom that I like to think of as toes, but you know, made out of mushroom flesh flaps. Make sure it's nice and flat so she can stand up on her own. Then starting from the base, I'm adding all the frilly layers. This is what her unmutated feet look like, and they're very loosely based on what the actual fly agaric stem is like. It sometimes has these little frilly bits at the bottom, so I kind of took that and ran with it. But her right foot has been more affected by the curse, so there's only a few odd frills and lots of pustules. I then glued the feet back to the body and used some epoxy to blend them into the legs with more frills. I sanded everything down but used a really low grit on the plastic so that it'd leave lots of scratch marks. I wanted her skin to have some gnarly texture and I thought that'd be an easy way to do it. I also used some UV resin to make the patch on her shoulder. I also made some holes in her face, and I also drew out where her irises will be. Now that's all sorted, I can pop out her eyes and get started with the painting. I'm using a pastel green for the base to match the colour of the doll. That way I only need to cover the grey clay and I can just stipple the plastic for texture. I'm using a squid pink for the inner ears, eye wrinkles, and the little holes. Then blending a pastel pink over top. I don't plan on doing any normal shading with this one. Instead, I'm going to use this fluorescent green wherever there would be shadowing, and then yellows where I'd normally put the highlights. And then some red for shadowing on the pink, but only on the fleshy pink parts, not the flaps and frills. Hopefully this will help tie in the red cap as well. As always, I'm going with messy wet blends and dry brushing. I just really love having a painterly texture on sculptures, you know? That's her head finished, so onto the body. I chose yellow for the drippy patch. When it comes to unsettling colours, what could be better than milky yellow and green? The pustules get a pink base and then random orange and yellow patches. I imagine they would emit hallucinogenic spores into the air around her, so they needed to be colourful, but still pastel tones, as I want everything but the cap to be pale. She would have originally been off-white like the actual fly agaric mushroom stem is, so I thought that'd be pretty fitting. I did play around with different colour schemes whilst drawing the mock-up. At first I was going to go with something a bit more deeper, like a classic psychedelic palette, but it just didn't look right at all. Plus, I kept thinking of Made in Abyss. I loved how a soft storybook style art was used to depict really disturbing creatures, so I decided to try something similar out and went with a pastel colour scheme, but I did keep a more subtle psychedelic feel by having that fluorescent green and yellow in there. I found that using milky yellow edge highlights really helps tie everything together. For a pop of colour, I painted one of the irises blue, but then went with green and orange for the others to match the body. The vines need to be more pigmented than other areas, so I went with a blend of green and yellow, but I left some patches of the skin tone visible to imply that a skin has sort of fused together with the vines. Trying to fill the hole in a leg with red was extremely annoying. I really should have painted it before adding the dangly bit, but why make things easy when you can make them difficult? I got there in the end though, and I think it looks pretty cool, kind of like cartoon meat. I know the inside of a mushroom obviously wouldn't actually look like that, but I think it adds to the unnatural grossness, you know? Repeat the same on her lower legs. And then add the pinks to her feet. I also decided to try out a speckled splattery style on these pustules, and added some red to the bottoms of her feet. I completely fell in love with this squid pink and red combination, so there is now a dragon in the works in that colour scheme. I felt like something was missing, so I went in with the yellow and green on the top frill. Like whatever primordial ooze that infected her is slowly seeping down from the leg into her foot. I also really wasn't feeling the splatters, so I switched them to swirls. They look like pretty little planets, ready to get everyone high. I'm happy with the paint job, which means it's time for some UV resin. The pustules would definitely be super slimy and moist, so hopefully some resin will help sell that. And the various holes too. And of course the eyes. It's so satisfying adding resin to the eyes, although I'm pretty terrible at avoiding air bubbles, to be honest. The main body is finished, so let's make her some eyes. I'm starting with white, as painting over grey with yellow is an absolute nightmare. And then blending orange around the edges. A small highlight under the iris. Then a yellowy green colour. With a fluorescent green ring around the edge. And fuzzy white pupils. Smother with resin. And then I can push them back into a head. I also added a little resin once they were in place to help blend them into the sockets. I am so pleased with the head. I think it's just the right amount of derpy cuteness. But she still needs some arms, so let's make some. I made the base from toothpicks, foil and armature wire. And then sculpted with clay. I'm keeping the left arm nice and simple, some droopy shapes and a couple of finger-like bits similar to my ink cap mushroom. Once that was baked, I made a hole in the arm. And then glued the hand in place. Then used epoxy to finish off the sculpting. Check that articulation. And we're done. Actually, no. I think it's too big. So I cut off the hand and replaced it with a smaller one. Since I'm going for an asymmetrical design with the arms, the size difference needs to be obvious. If not, it just looks awkward and unintentional. So this smaller version should work much better. And it's a nicer shape too. Finish off the raggedy bits. And then onto the big chunk of a right arm. I want this one to be an actual claw instead, so I'm starting with adding 3 of those to the base in varying sizes. So the smallest one is like a thumb, sort of. Make sure the tips are nice and pointy. The bulk of the claw hand consists of various flaps, so I'm just starting at the bottom and then working my way up to the top, trying to keep the bottom and top ones much thinner so I don't lose the overall shape. When I mix up too much epoxy, which is every time, I often roll it into balls, which then comes in handy for projects like this, as I now have a bunch of various blobs ready to push in place. I glued the claw to the arm, and then carried on adding the balls to blend it up to the wrist. Added some scales, some flappy bits, check nothing's stuck in place, I gave them a good sanding and now it's on to the painting. The left one is the same as the body, but I dry brushed a little pink on top for some variation. For the right one, I added the green shadowy bits, then painted the scales yellow, the flaps pink, with yellow edge highlights, splattered the pustules, but you already know they don't stay that way, switched a few random folds to pink, added the milky yellow edge highlights, and switched to swirls. The claws get a pink base, some red blended at the top, pastel pink from the bottom, and yellow tips. Smother those pustules in some UV resin. Claws always look better shiny in my opinion, so let's coat them with resin too. And that's our arms finished, so all that's left is the cap. I started with some foil smushed into shape, covered the base in clay, added the gills. I'm leaving them a little chunkier than they should be to fit with the cartoon aesthetic. Baked. And then covered the top in clay. I pre-baked some balls for the eyes, split them in half, and then pushed them into place. Using some worms of clay, I can smooth that out and make the eye folds. And then return to my jar of miscellaneous epoxy bits for some more pustules. Then added all the little spots, making sure they have a nice bumpy texture. Almost there, we just need to add the raggedy edges. After baking, I used a Dremel to make the divots for the irises, and then used a pale orange wash to get in between those gills. Dry brushed with milky yellow, and again, until it's nice and bright. The top gets coated in bright red, the spots get a yellow base, and then the same dry brushing as the gills. I'm adding pink to help the folds stand out, first blending it, and then clean lines on top. The eyeballs get painted yellow with the red gradient, and the pustules get swirls. I then painted the eyes to match the ones on her stomach. I'd normally add more detail with the eyes, but in this case I actually really liked the simple and bright style. I think it's because she looks quite cartoony, it just seemed to fit better. I gave it a couple of coats of Mr. Super Clear to get rid of that annoying paint sheen, and then added the resin. And that is my mutated fly agaric cap complete, which means it's time to check out the finished Myconid. I'm so happy with how this cursed cutie turned out, but she is lacking a name. Got any suggestions? And don't forget, if you want to see more of my characters come to life, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.